Another victory in the Justice Department's fight against fraud. This gold chain-wearing founder of a so-called healthcare company is now facing 20 years in prison after a Florida jury convicted him of running a billion-dollar kickback scheme preying on some of society's most vulnerable. The Justice Department says he targeted the sick, the elderly, coercing them into buying unnecessary medical equipment, calling it cold, calculated, industrial-scale theft. Hello, everyone. This is Outnumbered. I'm Kayleigh McEnany, here with my co-host, Emily Campagno. Also joining us, Martha McCallum, anchor and executive editor of The Story and co-anchor of Fox News election coverage. Carly Shimkus, Fox and Friends' first co-host, and Jeremy Hunt, former Army intelligence captain and Hudson Institute fellow. Well, Acting Attorney General Todd Blanche called the scheme one of the most egregious in Florida's history. The DOJ shared these images of Blackman showcasing his wealth in a music video, including a large waterfront property. And investigators say he and his co-conspirators used foreign call centers to target hundreds of thousands of Medicare beneficiaries and bribe telemedicine doctors to write them bogus prescriptions for medical equipment they did not need. Then they say the fraudsters would bill Medicare for it costing taxpayers more than $1 billion with a B. The Assistant Attorney General of the DOJ's National Fraud Enforcement Division said it will continue to aggressively prosecute healthcare fraud schemes, hold criminals accountable, and protect the integrity of America's healthcare system. Now, this comes after Vice President and fraud czar Vance, of course, who I'm speaking of, touted the administration's fraud crackdown in Maine yesterday. The vice president claimed that Maine was maybe the bronze medalist for fraud in the U.S., trailing only Minnesota and California, also blue states. I also sat down with the vice president in an exclusive interview airing tomorrow on Saturday in America. Here's a look.
We've got a lot of resources and we're working very hard on this. Some of the best stuff, whether it's Nick Shirley or whether it's you raising that with me, citizens have a role to play in this. And we've actually set up a fraud hotline where people can call in and suggest that maybe they're seeing things that are not totally above board, because to fix this problem, it's so deep-seated, it's so broad. We actually need everybody to raise this stuff. We need citizen journalists. We need, Fox News reporters. We need everybody to be asking ourselves the question, how do we root out this fraud? Because it's hard to fathom. You pay your taxes and it goes to a terrorist when your country is trying to prevent those terrorists from killing your fellow Americans. It is shocking, but it's the sort of thing that happens when the federal government turns a blind eye to this stuff.
Emily, here's one of the things I was very impressed by was he is taking civilian reporting seriously, whether it's 24-year-old Nick Shirley. I brought him documents we have found on my program, an Inspector General report showing Newsom was given 5 years warning about the hospice fraud. I also showed him a whistleblower report from Minnesota where a whistleblower said money is going to terrorism. Nothing was done about it. And in real time, he provided action item answers. They have a line you can call into if you see fraud in your state. They are action oriented, and that is what people are demanding.
And I noticed the distinction about how refreshing and encouraging it is to see our vice president that respects the citizen journalists, rather than you contrast that with, for example, Governor Walz and Governor Newsom, both of whom called Nick Shirley a white supremacist, for example. That was Walz. Made fun of his hair. That was Newsom. That was their response to the citizen journalist outline and detailing 5 years later millions up to the billions dollars worth of fraud, and that was their response. So it's incredibly encouraging. I will say this: we see in courts, in trials, and now in usually federal penitentiaries quite often, people don't like people who don't pay their taxes, right? So in, let's say, minimum security penitentiaries, you see that the people with the really long sentences are the ones that didn't take the plea. I'm talking about white collar crimes, are the ones that didn't take the plea deal, because your fellow American doesn't like to see someone that skimmed money off the top, because we all have to pay our fair share. And I bring that up to say that I really hope in these ensuing trials, because there will always be fraudsters. There will always be people with corrupt souls who are blinded by money and who attempt to deceive and defraud others and have zero type of moral culpability or code whatsoever to say, gosh, I'm really hurting others right now. There's going to be millions of those. But it's up to the citizens as well in the juries to put these guys away for so long. And I hope that this is presented in a way as being someone, and I'm sure you guys have too, have navigated the Medicare and Medi-Cal system specifically for my mother when she was in hospice, and to have to deal with how difficult and labyrinthian it is, and how sad and scary it is as you're navigating that with your loved one who needs help. So to think about these fraudsters that know the system is so opaque, is so without any type of accountability or visibility as to get away with it, whether it's in Florida or California or any state in between, it is so heartbreaking to me. It is so angering to me. So I hope that, yes, we have Vice President Vance and so much more task force, but also that on the other side, guys, let's put these guys in jail for a really long time so that this never happens again.
That's what the American people are demanding. They want arrest. They want jail time. They don't want plea deals like some of the ones I've read about in Minnesota. And Martha, we began talking about this Florida scheme. That's not in isolation. There's a San Diego case where money was supposed to go to fentanyl, addressing that. A woman got breast implants, tweaks to her arms and thighs, and a tummy tuck. This is in the California Post. LA, there was another one. The guy got $7 million in a home, 125,000 Range Rover, private school tuition, a private jet. One more, I'll just tell you. A top aide to Gavin Newsom is accused of using money for a Chanel bag and a birthday blowout in Mexico. The examples are numerous.
It's disgusting. And one of the things that I really like that Vice President Vance talked about the other day is that there are fraud prevention institutions in these state organizations.
Yeah.
These people are not doing their jobs. So he's saying, if you're not doing your job, you're not finding this fraud, why should it fall to the federal government when we're already using taxpayer dollars to pay people whose jobs it is to find this fraud? So he said, when we see that, we're going to take away that budget, because we need that money to do it ourselves. Yeah. Now, I would like to see, you talk about people going to jail, I'd like to see people fired. If you're in charge of, in Minnesota or any of these other states, Maine, if you're in charge of finding fraud and you failed at your job, you should lose it. The problem is that government employees get so entrenched, there's no merit system. It's not like, oh, look what I found. You're not going to get a big bonus. You're not going to get a promotion when you find that, because there's no structure for merit-based government work. Yeah. So people go, I don't care. You send in the form, we're going to send him. I found, you just listed a bunch. I found another guy who, during the $800 billion in PPP loans, just claimed he had a company that had 150 employees, and they sent him a check in 2 days for $200,000. He said, oh, here's your money. Can you imagine how much more fraud there is in this PPP system that we don't even know about yet? But look, these people who are supposed to be sniffing this stuff out and finding the accountability instead of stealing our federal tax dollars, they need to be fired and held accountable.
Yet John Yoo, Bush DOJ, has told me if they knew that there was money going to terrorism and there was any aiding and abetting from state officials, he said this is something the DOJ should look into. It's something that I brought up, and there was a very interesting answer to that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's something the DOJ needs to take a closer look at. I think a big part of what Vice President Vance, with him concentrating on it and kind of shining a light on it, I do expect to see a lot more of these stories coming out now. I will say, when I looked at the story, and I'm looking at a guy who, schemed $1 billion out of the government and went undetected for all these years. Right. In my mind, I was thinking this guy must be some type of Ocean's 11 criminal mastermind, you know what I mean? And then you look at this picture, and there's this guy with this fake gold chain, this wannabe.
Wait, it was probably real, actually. If he skimmed $1 billion, it was probably.
But it shows you how easy it is.
Yeah.
It's so easy.
That's exactly right. It shows you how easy it is to basically get over on our government, and it goes undetected for so many years. And what's frustrating about it, I think about the example you just had about the PPP fraud, and you're getting a check in just a couple weeks, is that government seems to work so quickly. For some of these fraudsters who are working all these schemes, the rest of us, if you're expecting anything from the government, well, you better wait several months, right? I mean, it is remarkable how they have gotten away with this. I'm happy that finally we're shining a light on this. And the last thing I'll say, apparently this guy that was scheming the $1 billion, he had a telemarketing scheme. And I think I speak on behalf of all Americans saying, telemarketing scheme, this guy needs to be put behind bars forever. I'm so sick of all the telemarketing calls, and I get 10 a day. Yes, absolutely.
Carly, you have to address it on the back end, getting guys like this in jail, but also on the front end. Yeah. And this is something that I found interesting. They're going to use artificial intelligence to try to collect publicly available data to find these fraudsters, which I think is brilliant. Because one thing people might not realize, the federal government doesn't just have a list of everyone on Medicaid. They actually have to get much of that information from blue state governors, like in Minnesota, where they are suing, 20 blue states suing to keep the names of Medicaid recipients from the federal government. So they are innovative in saying, fine, we'll use AI.
A very
very good use, a creative use of AI. And I mean, I think that it's a very good idea that the Trump administration is focusing on fraud. People care about it, which is why they're talking about it, so much so they made the vice president the face of it. And I think that when we get closer to the midterm elections, Republicans are going to cut an ad where we start to meet some of these fraud victims, and they tell their stories about what they went through and what they would still be going through if not for this focus. I mean, Jeremy, the same things that struck you about this case in Florida struck me, where if you want to know who benefits on the other side of a spam call, one of these spam calls that we all get, it's this guy and his gold chain, like you mentioned, where he's hiring these call centers in the Philippines. And what they did was they contacted elderly people, convinced them that they were sick, they needed a medical device. And so that I'm sure some of these people spent money out of pocket, and then we're out a total of $450 million, which is the cost of entire government programs. So I think you hear a lot of similar themes, similar themes on the campaign trail, similar ideas. This one feels entirely new, and it's one that Republicans can really take a hold of here. I think that's brilliant. Meet the fraudsters the left are protecting. I mean, what a great ad.
Meet the fraudsters, and then also meet the victims of this fraud as well.
Yeah, brilliant idea.
Be sure to like and subscribe for all the Fox News latest on YouTube, and catch full shows streaming now on Fox One.